Hi, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Contemporary Feminists. At one point during these difficult times, we were collectively inspired as LaSallian students to create a safe space for our peers from different backgrounds to share stories of activism, politics, gender equality, misogyny, sexual and reproductive rights, and other pressing matters women continue to face in the 21st century Philippines.
Here, we continue to educate ourselves by having difficult conversations and perhaps begin to recognize what it truly means to become better allies for women, calling out discrimination when we see it, fighting for human rights when our government fails to do so, and most importantly, collectively demanding change when our voices are forced shut.
One point in our lives, even as women, we may have also been a part of the collective problem by unwaringly perpetuating patriarchy, the very root of gender inequality. This is why we are gathered here today to have a healthy educational discourse and tackle real world problems from multiple viewpoints. We are Group 5 from NO4A, LaSallian Studies 1, shedding light on some of the biggest moral and political issues of today through this podcast. Hello, I am Kristine Montecillo, your local social justice seeker, speaking for you today.
I am Faith Ylizabelle Rodriguez, your opinionated far from home Lasallian.
I am Alessandra Zoe, your neighborhood Pisces feminist from the South.
I am Laurie, your friendly future doctora from Mindanao.
And I'm Maxine Tolentino. You can refer to me as Maxie. I'm happy to be one of your hosts for this episode. Come join us as we navigate a 21st century world where the personal gets political.
You guys, I am so excited to start this discourse with you. But before we begin, oo nga pala, I think it's important for us to clarify muna what the feminist is and what they really do. Kasi I think for the most of us, maraming nalilito kung ano talaga yung ibig sabihin, right? And what do feminists stand for, yeah?
True.
That's
So,
right, that's right.
Ano yung thoughts nyo? Laurie, ikaw?
The last time I checked, the dictionary actually says that a feminist is someone who advocates for social, political, and economic rights for women equal to those of men. Medyo obvious naman siya, but I think it's still very important to clarify that women's rights are still human rights. So both women and men can definitely be feminists.
Yeah, I completely agree sa part na both women and men can be feminists, not just women. Gender inequality and other pressing issues around the world shouldn't only concern half the people on the planet. Kapag may lalaking feminist, that means naintindihan nila at sensitive sila sa mga struggles at inequalities na pinagdadaanan nating mga kapwa babae. Sa araw-araw nating mga gawain, di ba?
I agree. Dagdag ko lang din pala, feminists and activists in the Philippines are actually fighting for so many advocacies and human rights issues. Lalo na because we feel like the government hasn't been really paying attention to the calls of our fellow countrymen. Ngayong malapit na ang halalan, isa ring problema ng mga Pilipino ang gender discrimination when it comes to positions of power.
Oo nga. Girls, speaking of gender discrimination ngayong election season, what are your thoughts on Vice President Leni Robredo being the only woman running for president? Balita ko kasi she has been getting so much backlash for this. I think it's because, people think only men are fit for the job of a president. Halata namang halos lahat ng mga kandidato ay lalaki. Kaya napaka-obvious rin na sobrang patriarchal ng ating gobyerno.
Karamihan ng mga Pilipino, men and women, have the same assumption na kababaihan ay masyadong fragile para mamuno. This shows how deep the roots of patriarchy is in our society. It runs so deep that some women are actually convinced that fellow women cannot and should not be able to lead a country.
Oh, yeah.
Kailangan natin baguhin ang pag-iisip na ito because the public perceptions of women's capacity to lead is a critical determinant talaga of how much power they will have while in the office, di ba? True, di ba?
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with
Mm-mm.
that. And alam mo, super nababother talaga ako sa mga sinasabi ng tao na VP Lenny cannot lead because she should only stay home and be a mother. Kasi a lot of trolls online, I think you guys can see it naman all over Facebook and stuff, right? Na ang daming
Yeah.
gumagamit na trolls na sinasabi nila yung argument na yan as to why she, along with other female leaders, cannot lead, no? Kasi our society has this preconceived notion about what us women can or cannot do. And I think I can say it naman dito, di ba, na for you guys din, if you feel nyo na these stereotypes are also the things that limits you and I as a woman.
Yeah, totoo. As you see, we really are somehow restricted to a lot of things, no? First one being those stereotypes, then follows the struggle in dealing with our daily lives. Simply walking outside can be risky for us, diba? Ang hirap lumabas once dumilim na because we always worry
True.
about catcalling or
Oo.
even worse, 'di ba? Getting in actual trouble kasi yung mga nakakalungkot pa dito sa society natin is yung victim blaming. Parati
Yeah.
yung victim yung
Agree.
nasisisi.
Mm-mm.
There's always a reason people make out as to why the harasser's actions are valid kahit hindi naman talaga.
I agree. I often notice then, and I'm sure you guys do too, that a lot of women in our country are treated as if they are second-class citizens. You know, sadly, this is common for developing countries such as ours. Women are subjected to domestic violence, isa pa yun, lacking proper healthcare and education, especially those living in poverty. It is crucial that we choose leaders who will make a difference regarding these issues. What we need are more leaders or representatives in our government who can relate, understand, and empathize with the struggles thousands and thousands of Filipino women go through each day. Someone who can
Yes.
find effective solutions for each and every one who faces discrimination and are victims of a patriarchal society.
Speaking of a patriarchal society, let me first explain to our listeners what this means. The patriarchy kasi is basically a social system where men predominate in roles of political leadership, moral authority, and social privilege. I believe that this social system must be abolished in order to achieve true equality. Diba, guys?
Yes,
Mm-mm,
agree.
true.
Yeah, that's true.
And sexism naman is the discrimination based on gender or sex, or the belief na men are superior to women, which is a product of patriarchy. This affects many aspects of our lives, especially in economic systems. It even has an impact on women's roles as household leads and how most men aren't held accountable for their actions, while women are often placed under a magnifying glass.
I agree with that. When women defy conventional norms about what they do and how they act, criticism agad, di ba?
True.
Frequently met with resentment and harsh criticism. For example, when a woman bears a child out of wedlock, she receives more backlash than the man who is also responsible in conceiving the child. In crimes gaya ng rape, most of the time women are blamed for putting themselves in the position to get raped. You know that. You guys know that, right?
Yeah, grabe talaga.
They're blamed for most of the time. They're blamed rather than blaming the rapist himself. Clearly, the scale is broken and it is up to us to fix it naman.
Oh, grabe yung valid na points na sinabi niyo today, yung male privilege and yung patriarchy, gender discrimination, yung demeaning of women, sexual harassment, violence against women, and sexual objectifications are all forms of misogyny. You know, as women, we have been oppressed for generations now. Our human rights, rather, have been violated. And we have been viewed as a lower class member of society. Nakakalungkot, di ba? Kasi why are we not treated the same as men? Then thousands of crimes against us women that stem from misogyny are recorded every single year.
That's true. When you mentioned something about us women being oppressed for generations, I already thought of a topic since we are talking about misogyny rin naman. Kasi historically, there have been a lot of wrongs on women, most especially when it comes to healthcare, solely because, well, they are a woman. And I remember the name. Ito natutunan ko siya when I was studying biology. And her name is Henrietta Lacks. Yung relevance niya on science itself, kasi her cells were used up until now, or are still being used actually up until now. And it is proven to be one of the greatest breakthroughs in cancer research. Kaso nga lang, yung problema, kaya ko nasabi na we've been oppressed for generations. It's because her cells were obtained unethically. It was taken right after she died to be studied without the consent of her family. So basically, nobody knew, but a part of her has been taken already. And it seems to me as if na hindi siya nire-regard as important enough as a Black woman. Kasi, in the 1950s, it's a hard year,
Yeah.
diba? For people of color and
Grabe.
women as well.
Yes.
Diba? So,
Grabe
feel ko lang talaga.
Racism.
True. Feel ko talaga na she wasn't regarded as important enough para hingan ng consent.
I've actually heard about her as well. Hello cells underpins so much of modern medicine talaga. As far as I know, yung recent application nun has been under research for vaccines against COVID. Meaning up until now, it is very essential in the scientific field pa rin. These things are just proof that misogyny can resonate in so many things. We don't only see it in our government's patriarchal system, but also here in our healthcare.
So guys, now that we are on the subject of healthcare, I'm sure everyone is aware how there are so many issues about this particular system in our country, lalo na for us women, di ba? Remember when they were trying... Remember when they were first trying to propose a reproductive health bill, or widely known as the RH bill? A lot of people protested against it, saying that it's anti-Christianity and it essentially goes against nature. They hated the idea of contraceptives being accessible to everyone. It completely disregards the other benefits of that legislation, such as the maternal health care services, di ba?
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. Oo nga. It's true. So, wait. Before we dive into that, let's give our audience muna some background information about that.
Yeah, true. Okay.
Okay.
So, you guys, the Reproductive Health Bill is the Responsible Parenthood and Reproductive Health Act of 2012. Its main objectives are to provide widespread access to methods of contraception, fertility control, sexual education, and maternal care in our country. Ang alam ko, it has been passed as a law already, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Ay, talaga?
Yeah. So, yun nga, it's known as Republic Act number 10354. And before I forget, for the people who don't know, contraceptives are what used to prevent unplanned pregnancies. In simple terms, it is used to practice safe sex. Ito yung mga condoms and pills and etc.
I think kaya ang daming against dito kasi our country is predominantly Catholic. That's why our fellow countrymen don't really know these terms yet.
That's true.
To say our country is conservative is quite an understatement. We are taught not to use contraceptives kasi it's preventing the conception of life now. Even our sex education is quite limited and, often sugar-coated. Instead, we are encouraged to practice abstinence and not even dare to think of that matter as if it's not a part of life, diba? Ang ironic lang kasi numerous researches show na that method is not even effective whatsoever.
Speaking of that, may kakwento ko sa inyo.
Ano yan?
Naalala ko back then when I was being taught sex education back in my school, the information given to me was not entirely helpful kasi they kept on preaching that abstinence is the key, practically implying that if you don't want any problems, just don't have sex. Which is very against human nature, diba?
True, against natural selection.
Yeah. I mean, I get where they're coming from because most of the schools I attended are Catholic schools and they have to somehow align their teaching to their values. Completely understandable. I have nothing against that. Although, from an academic standpoint, it is very disappointing, diba, that I wasn't given the sufficient information I should know to educate and protect myself as a young adult. Kasi ang pangat naman isipin na I'm never really gonna have sex in my entire life, diba?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's part of life anyway.
Yeah.
True.
So if done right kasi, if you talk about sex properly with enough information, it can actually help and prevent various predicaments that are avoidable. Kaya I support this RH bill talaga. I really hope that it can be implemented effectively.
That's true. Kasi minsan it's on implementation talaga. Alam mo ba, I still don't know much about my body. Sometimes it surprises me yung mga natututunan ko about my body. It's because again,
Me too.
diba, yung sex ed in our country is kind of taboo. Pero now, na-mention mo rin yung RH bill and we are on the topic of laws and implementation, I think it's appropriate for me to mention the unfairness women face in attaining government positions. Kasi kita nyo naman siguro, no, in the past, women have been largely missing from positions of formal power. Lalo na if you look back at the records, kitang-kita yun na mostly it's men, men with a few exceptions were routinely in charge of such positions. And as a result of that, us women have been denied the opportunity to lead in most public spaces. And because of that, leadership has been intimately linked to masculinity as a cause and effect. Lagi nating tinatay yung leadership to men. Even in what we consider to be the most modern countries, not only here in the Philippines, there are people who believe that men are natural leaders while us women are just, supposed to follow, diba? That is still the case in various parts of the world, again, not only in the Philippines.
Actually, even until now, majority of the elected officials are men. Only 23 Filipino women became elected officials in the Philippine history. This is a lot about the position women are put here in the Philippines na kapag babae ka, wala ka na agad kwenta to lead the Filipino people. Women are usually seen as weak, emotional, and indecisive, which is one of the main reasons why there's only a handful of them in the government. It's already 2022 na, and
Kaya
women
nga.
are actually seen as competent leaders.
Agreed.
After having so many examples of them all around the world, gaya nung president sa New Zealand.
True.
Ay,
Oo nga,
oo.
tama.
Ay,
The
oo
COVID
nga.
response was amazing.
Yeah.
Grabe.
Actually, guys, we have a Magna Carta of Women that was passed pala as a law in 2009. Its aim is to stop discrimination against women through recognition, protection, and fulfillment of women's rights. We have this law, and yet we're still a patriarchal society since people tend to be more on the traditional side of things, diba? They have the mindset that women should only be housewives and they should only care for the family and that men should be the ones earning for the family. Honestly, if Vice President Leni Robredo was a man, she would be celebrated by the masses, diba?
Definitely.
That's true.
Right, you guys?
Yeah.
Yun nga. Kasi babae siya, people tend to overlook her achievements or give backhanded compliments, which I think is really unfortunate.
True. There is definitely, I can't stress this enough, there is definitely a need for more women in politics. Grabe nakaka-empower knowing you have someone representing you and the issues you face in society.
Super, yeah.
Oh, totoo.
That's
Yeah,
true.
we need more women like Senator Risa Hontiveros and Vice President Leni Robredo who are willing to fight for women's rights and inspire more women to take charge as well.
Kasi sa country natin, no, it's really far from equality. And I believe that we need better people leading us kaysa naman sa mga nagpapasikat lang kada election, right?
Super dami.
And throughout our history, we have placed people in power who are misogynistic, corrupt, incompetent, and most of them care little for women's rights and kahit yung equality ng lahat ng tao. The representation of feminists and women in our government is crucial in order to have a better system and a progressive society.
Yet, the leader role itself exerts similar pressures on both women and men. A president, for example, is expected to quote-unquote act presidential daw, which is to proceed with a certain dignity and competence, which is, I guess, a norm that applies to men and women alike. To change course, power must be shared equally, made visible and accountable at all levels, of course, and that is what's at the core of feminist leadership.
I agree, that's true. Although we can tell naman na onti lang sila around the world, that today's female leaders are tenacious and multi-talented.
Yes.
They're bringing the global climate movement together. They're even advocating for social protections, diba? Tackling the COVID-19 catastrophe and eradicating discrimination such as racism, as a whole system. Women leaders make a difference talaga in people's lives, and they motivate everyone to have a brighter future, don't you guys think?
Agreed. Lalo na sa sinabi ni Lori kanina dun sa New Zealand. Diba kasi ang ganda ng naging COVID response nila. So I do believe that in order for us to tackle today's tremendous problems, we need radical feminist leadership. And New Zealand has shown that really well. Redefining value and success, sharing power and credit, establishing community and relationships, and then finally addressing the core causes of the oppressive system and social norms that stifle progress for all people, including women and girls, of course, are all part of leading with feminist ideals.
Since we need more leaders with feminist ideals, a presidential candidate comes into mind. And I think you guys know who I'm talking about.
Of course,
yes.
Of course we do.
Pinaka nag-stand out sa lahat ng candidates. And Leni Gerona Robredo is her name. Or rather when Leni Robredo is elected president, naniniwala talaga ako na she will get right to work. In our times now, the Filipino people are in dire need of a leader who is transparent, competent, strong, and one who is full of compassion, diba? You guys know that.
Yeah,
I agree.
of course.
Nakaka-amaze nga siya kasi she has a clear idea talaga where she wants to go.
I think she's the only
Meanwhile,
one with an idea. Sure. Kidding or not.
The other contenders, as we saw in the recent interviews, diba, parang di nila alam ginagawa nila, or rather don't care about the Philippines' economic, health, and educational challenges. Not to mention yung moral crisis na dinadanas natin today, which appears to be have caused by the country's leaders' decision to follow its moral compass.
Long story short, we need a leader whose actions reflect their words. A role model for everyone. The Philippines is in its worst state since the conclusion of World War II, aminin nyo. But we have a one-of-a-kind candidate who has the unique ability to lead the country out of the abyss. It is up to all of us na to decide whether we want to save our country or not.
Oh, definitely, Alex. We have the power talaga to decide, to choose whether we want this continuous flow of oppression and unfairness in our country. This means that us Lasallians must put it in our utmost priority to be aware of what's right and what's wrong sa darating na halalan this May. You guys have mentioned VP Leni and her having clear ideals, and I cannot agree with you guys anymore. Her words are backed up with actions and just not pretty little lies, diba?
That is so true, Kristine. Alam mo yun, kitang-kita naman kasi once you conduct proper research, which I would say isn't very popular in the Philippines. I think we believe memes more than we do science and research, diba? So I do have to emphasize, this is very important kasi the national elections will directly affect how we live. So then, it's crucial na even before we do cast our votes, sure tayo dun sa mga napili natin. And again, through research and not Facebook memes, we will be able to pick who among these candidates has enough competency and genuine intention to pull the Philippines out of its rock bottom. Kasi we must be over making irrational decisions like picking who's famous lang, yung kilalang pangalan lang, yung nag-artista lang, tas ngayon ginawang ginawang next career, yung politics, diba?
Gusto maging senator.
Ayun, yung mga ganon.
Yeah, yung mga
Iwasan natin.
sumasayaw-sayaw lang dyan.
Maraming ganon. So, iwasan nating makita yung mga potential sa malalaking pangalan na yan without seeing actual credentials, right?
Mm-mm.
True.
Lalong-lalo na yung mga ngayon lang nagpaparamdam kung kailan election na.
Uy.
Yes.
You see,
We can name
you
names,
see,
Machar.
with actions like that, you can really see their intent. You know, we're born leaders that actually want change in our country, and those who just want the money, diba? You know. Tingin ko for us Lasalians, you can easily see through these people as we have been taught about the many Lasalian core values. I can't help but bring it up because in these times, it's definitely timely to mention. For overview, the core values are spirit of faith, zeal for service, and the communion and mission.
Exactly, Lori. I'm really glad na you've mentioned that, as these three values are indeed fundamental to our Lasallian identity. We need not to solely possess these values, but I believe we can reflect it among our candidates as well. What I mean by that is that maybe we can try and look at our presidential candidates one by one and ask ourselves, does this person hold a Lasallian core value? The importance of asking that question lies in determining their character. Ang kailangan kasi nating mga Pilipino ngayon ay syempre isang leader na marunong umintindi. Who they really are, based on their true nature, has so much influence on how we can expect them to lead us as a country.
I second that, Alex. Our Lasallian core values can be applied for everyone naman kasi I believe we could place it in a context of pure intent. The spirit of faith is mostly about having this disposition of the mind and heart that allows us to have a clear interpretation and judgment of reality in light of the gospel, diba? So then we can say na an ideal leader is that someone who believes in Christ, as if that signifies that he or she knows what's right and wrong,
True.
and hopefully will be guided by him, diba?
Yes.
But this is not exclusive to other religions. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, definitely.
Kasi
Yeah, I agree.
through the spirit of faith, the way I see it, if a person possesses this, then they will be able to take necessary risks and actions that are quite bold, diba? That not everyone can do it, and they can they can do what is demanded by each
Yes.
situation.
Exactly.
Oo nga, I agree with that so much. That is indeed another way to see it. With you sharing that thought, Maxi, it seemed to me na we can relate that to zeal of service, no? As it is an active expression of one's faith. Kapag ang isang tao grounded sa values and beliefs and is strengthened by their faith, then they can so easily fulfill their rightful tasks. Right?
Yeah.
In the case of our presidentiables, once maganda yung foundation ng spirit of faith nila, for sure, the service that they can offer on the table would be one that is above themselves, no?
Yeah.
Definitely, Kristine. Yung naisip ko after you guys give your 2 cents is the situation of our country right now. We were just talking about ideal leaders and asking ourselves whether any of them fit the Lasallian core values. This reminded me of how divided we are as Filipinos. To complete the core values, I think it is then time to say na once a presidentiable has those 2 values checked, then they will be able to live by the virtue of communion and mission. This means na that leader will not provide more confusion and separation among us citizens, but be the cause of solidarity in one vision and mission rather. At the end of the day, all we want is the best for the Philippines, right? Our future leaders
Yes.
be open to unite everyone without prejudice.
Tama. You know, I love how you guys processed those and shared your views. And honestly, ang dami kong natutunan, ang dami kong na-absorb, through your ideals. And it makes so much sense. As a Lasallian, I am grateful to be able to apply these things that I'm learning from you guys in a much greater context. Kasi 'di ba, tama kayo. It is true na if a leader has the trifecta of those values, of these values, then they will give our country a fighting chance, So to everybody listening to our podcast right now, please do keep these in mind. Because the core values my co-speakers mentioned can create a dynamic that paves the way to a leader that knows how to provide service above self through the guidance of grounded and bona fide faith that will then bond our country together and, not sabotage it.
I agree. Also, gusto ko lang pala isingit, guys. I think it's very, very important to include in this discussion the importance of exercising our right to suffrage. Ngayong election season at malapit na ang month of May, I'd like to remind everyone to please vote wisely talaga. And of course, to keep in mind the LaSallian core values they have mentioned a while ago when choosing the right set of candidates to vote for. We must remember that although our vote is for our own selves nga, but it is also for everyone else in the country, for the women who are going through endless hardships today, for the marginalized and oppressed, and especially for our children in the future.
Tama, I agree with you, Lex. We have to keep in mind that all of the struggles we have talked about this podcast are mostly rooted from our politicians and other people in power. But the good thing is that we now have a chance to make a change in this country and actually choose competent leaders this time. I'm pretty sure we have learned our lessons na sa sobrang dami ba namang pinagdaanan in this country for the past few years. Sana we take advantage of this chance to vote by choosing candidates who are embodiment of our LaSallian core values.
Oo. So for all our listeners out there, I'd like to re-emphasize that with our right to vote, we have enough power to completely change this crumbling nation. If you want to have safe spaces for our kapwa babae, then vote for potential allies in the Senate and in our local government, diba? If you've had enough of politicians blaring their profanities during diplomatic discussions, then it's time to elect decent leaders who can handle the etiquettes in the professional arena, right?
Yeah.
That's true, yeah.
So, long story short, if you want a better country, then please do vote intelligently.
Yes, of course.
I couldn't agree more. So far, we now have elaborately delved into these various critical issues that women confront in this modern period, as well as the importance of exercising our right to suffrage as Filipino citizens. I hope that by bringing forth attention to activism, misogyny, politics, gender equality, sexual and reproductive rights, we have attained our objective of advocating human rights for everybody, particularly the female population, which has always been received the shorter end of the stick. Let us take today's lessons and apply them to our daily lives so that we could live as decent humans who contribute to society. May we also exemplify the LaSallian core values and be courageous advocates for important concerns that most people are afraid to address.
Yes, I agree with you, Lori. And this has been a really great discussion for all of us, no? And now, as we wrap up our podcast episode, as this comes to a close, I just want everyone, to reflect on the subjects we covered today. Let's have a little bit of reflection. Kasi we must ask ourselves important questions like, have you personally experienced these issues? Or naisip nyo na ba? Have you ever wondered kung part kayo ng problema? Like, am I part of the problem? It's good to think about those things because the first step toward change is actually admitting our flaws and having the desire to improve, syempre. And we have to remember, have to keep this in mind, na even the smallest step is still a step forward. So, for our sake and the sake of future generations, may we live in a more peaceful world as a result of our perseverance and dedication.
I sincerely believe that through teaching and advocating to the public about these issues, there will come a simple moment, such as wandering at night as a woman, will not be as frightening as it is now. This is a mundane action for some, but this will be an indicator that we are making progress towards reaching our goal. A world where a woman is treated equally and given the same respect as a man.
Ako rin. I hope that by producing this podcast, we might entice our listeners to join us on our path as contemporary feminists. On behalf of my colleagues, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to our in-depth discussion of the most pressing issues confronting women in this country. My name is Maxine, and I'm here with Lizzie, Alex, Kristine, and Lori. We're Group 5 of LaSallian Studies 1. And here closes the first episode of the podcast Contemporary Feminist. Thank you for your time and may your determination to fight for a better country remain unshaken. Yay! Thank you.
Yay!
Yay! Oh my God.
Yay! Thank you.